Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Insight. Today we want to talk about the adultery law as it currently stands, as defined by Section 497 of the IPC. The law has been challenged in the Supreme Court, which has agreed to hear a petition which seeks to quash the law on the central premise of the petitioner that it is unconstitutional because it violates Article 14, which relates to equality, Article 15, which relates to prohibition from discrimination, and Article 21, which concerns the fundamental right to life and liberty. Now, we all know that the law is not gender neutral and only punishes the man for his involvement in an extramarital affair with a married woman. On the face of it, clearly discriminatory. It has also been argued that the law is sexist because it does not prosecute a married man for having an extramarital relationship with an unmarried woman, and that it places the burden only on the wife to protect the sanctity of marriage. The central government has submitted an affidavit in the Supreme Court strongly defending the need to criminalize adultery because it is seen as imperative to preserve the sanctity of marriage. So the obvious point of debate is this: does the call for decriminalization bat for the license to cheat, as one side argues, or does it restore the extramarital affair to a matter of privacy, as argued by the other side? More importantly, should marital infidelity or fidelity be a matter of state intervention at all? And if the law should not be done away with, then should it be at least made gender neutral? Joining me today are Deepika Bharadwaj. She is a filmmaker, also a social activist; Karuna Nandi, advocate in the Supreme Court; Sujay Kantawala, also an advocate; and Aman Sinha, again an advocate but also spokesperson of the ruling party, the Bharatiya Janata Party. But let's start the show first by talking to Suvi Dutt, who is the counsel for the petitioner in the case, Joseph Shine. Thank you for joining us, Suvi. It's a great pleasure to speak to you, and thank you for giving us time. All right, Mr. Sundaram, the government has taken a counter view and wants the law to be retained and has cited previous Supreme Court judgments to bolster the case. What's your response to the government's counter affidavit that they filed in the apex court?
They have, outrightly stated that Section 497 of IPC, should not be, struck down, and it has to be there as such. However, in the closing paras of their counter affidavit, they have clearly stated another fact that some discussions are going on in the Law Commission also, and even the Law Commission of India has constituted working committees, and they are yet to come with their recommendations and suggestions. But I think before they come with their recommendations, definitely Supreme Court would hear our case, and very soon this matter would come to an end. So far as this petition is concerned, we are going for striking down of Section 497 of IPC.
We will now throw open this debate and have really a discussion, which is the original purpose of this show. Deepika Bharadwaj here with me in the studio, Karuna Nandi as well, Aman Sinha joins us, and Sujay Kantawala. Thank you all for being with us. Let me start with you, Sujay Kantawala, since I know that today you will be opposing the petition here, and on principle, really on the argument that it needs to be criminalized, it needs to stay the way it is. My question then, Sujay, would be this: why does the law of adultery not prosecute the wife who is having an affair with another man? Now, if the sex is consensual, is she not an equal partner in the alleged crime taking place? That would be the logical inference that some people would make. Why is it not so in the law?
See, I'll tell you, speaking for myself, though I'm a man, and with whatever little knowledge I have, historically, if you see, the man is always the person who is the man who cheats mainly. As far as the woman who is concerned, who is belonging to another man in marriage, in fact, the section itself says,
but Sujay,
if she has consensual sex
inherently
with the consent of her husband.
No, I mean, I wouldn't say sexist, but Sujay, isn't that inherently perhaps outdated now to assume and presume that only the man can cheat, and if the woman is in a relationship, only the man can
historically, the woman has suffered lot of trauma in this country, Atar.
Sure, all over the world, not just in this country, all over the world.
The Parmeshwar kind of concept. Let me complete.
Yeah, sure.
Let me just complete.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I wanted to state was this is not some adversarial thing, because the matter is ultimately going to be decided by the Supreme Court. This is my view.
Yeah.
Historically, if you see, the man has always gone out of the house. He has gone abroad. He has gone out of his town, and therefore the woman is always at the receiving end, where she has her needs also to be fulfilled. If her husband, for any reason whatsoever, cannot fulfill the needs, and if you see historically also that the woman is always subjugated, she's under trauma, we see that always happening in towns, cities, everywhere, then why should the section be changed? Because the section is correctly interpreting and emphasizing the plight of the woman. And therefore, I don't think for any reason whatsoever. And if you see 498A, 375, rape, abusing a woman, cruelty to the woman,
I want to get
all those are again gender bias.
In the debate here, because I mean, there would be many people, Deepika, who would say that this presumption, this assumption is inherently not equal, first of all, perhaps even sexist or reverse sexist, whatever you want to call it there. Because just presuming that if a woman steps out of a marriage, she's already the victim and she has no part to play in it. Is that not unequal?
That's absolutely unequal, Athar, and I'm not really sure if the gentleman who gave this argument would be fine if it personally happens in his own family. Traditionally, men have gone out and fetched and been a protector and a provider for the family. Does that person expect that when he is not there, the wife would actually go and have an affair with another woman? Then the man also, if he is traveling, he would have an affair with another woman, and there is absolutely no marriage and no meaning of marriage over there. The law is absolutely biased, of course, against men. Because only a man can be implicated in this. But the point that I really wish to ask from the perspective of adultery, Athar, is have we ever in purview of this law looked at who is the victim here? Who is because criminal justice system grants justice to the victim. So if a person is cheated upon in a marriage, whether that's a husband or the wife, do we consider that that person also has any right in that marriage or not? Is that person a victim? That person does that person needs justice if he is cheated upon or not?
Just to build on that, and I want to include Karuna here as well. Karuna Nandi joining us here. Karuna, the law presumes that in this context of adultery, all victims in all situations as per this particular law are women. I personally have a huge problem with that assumption. Also, I want to ask you part B of my question really. Should the law be prescribing morality at all? Why should an extramarital affair, which is also technically a matter of consent, be a criminal offense in the first place? Karuna, your thoughts before I go to Amar.
You know, I think it's very important to look at the actual letter of the law, because I think there are some misconceptions flying around as to who it protects. So, for example, I think the first speaker believes that it protects women. The second speaker operates that believes that it operates against men. The truth actually is somewhat different. If you look at section 497, what it really says is that it is the married man's property interest in his wife that is protected. Right? Why do I say that? Because it is only the married man who is the victim here. It's not that the woman is the victim. The offense is against the married man who has had his wife cheat on him. You know, so that's something that I think obviously is something that needs to go, because women are not property. And also I think that the law now slowly but surely, one hopes, is coming into accordance with the constitutional value, which is the bright line of consent, which is that if there is consent, then it cannot be a criminal offense. If there is no consent, then it is a criminal offense when it comes to sort of sexual affairs and sexual morality, right? So if you look at section 377, for example,
I'm glad you mentioned that particular
marital rape,
where
it is being argued on consent.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that particular sentence where the law in itself, in the letter of the law, uses the word property. And obviously I'm not a lawyer. There are 3 lawyers on this panel, and obviously I'll defer to your knowledge of the law on that. So Aman Sinha, let me ask you this. When the central government
it's not the letter of the law,
gave the affidavit in the Supreme Court and clearly mentioned that the institution of marriage really is something that's not to be scorned, and I'm absolutely fine with that wording. But do you think that the central government has taken perhaps a stand on a law which I'll guarantee you there have been legal precedents from the past which have been upheld as the law stands? But some observations, Aman Sinha, in these judgments have prompted us to question, and the reason really for the show today, especially in the Saumitri Vishnu versus Union of India case 1985, and in fact Justice Chandrachud, if I can quote him, has said, it is commonly accepted that it is the man who is the seducer and not the woman. Now, don't you think this position has undergone some sort of change really in the past, let's say 10, 20, 30 years? And don't you think that saying that it is commonly accepted that the man is always the seducer is a woeful generalization? Aman?
No, Athar, I agree with you that law has to evolve and change with times. There are certain anomalies in this provision. However, the government is against only the striking down of the provision in its entirety or decriminalizing it. The amendments, if at all, they are already being considered by the statutory designated authorities, which is the Law Commission. There are certain anomalies in the law, and I believe there is a report of the Malimat Committee. There are parliamentary standing committee reports on this, and thereafter the Law Commission is already seized of the matter. A final report, in fact, is awaited. So therefore, the government and the designated statutory authorities are already, conducting a comprehensive exercise, including, taking opinion of all the stakeholders, and thereafter they will come up with their suggestions. Now, as far as decriminalizing or striking down the provision in its entirety itself is concerned, Athar, that you are right. I agree with you that this is, the institution of marriage, some sanctity is accorded to it, and that should stay in that manner. That okay. Apart, we cannot have, encouraging Aman, adultery in the society,
okay.
Which leads to,
I just want to make one submission here. I just want to make one submission here and a counter question to you,
also
Aman,
has to be protected.
I'll just quickly read out what the central affidavit says, verbatim,
yes,
word for word, in the operative part for our viewers really to understand. It is submitted that striking down for section 497 of IPC and section 1982 of CRPC will prove to be detrimental to the intrinsic Indian ethos, which gives paramount importance to the institution of marriage and sanctity of marriage. The provisions under law challenge the present writ have been specifically created in the legislature with its wisdom to protect and safeguard the sanctity of marriage, keeping in mind the unique structure and culture of the Indian society. So here's the question then, Aman Sinha and Sujay Kantawala, both I want answers really, and it's a two-parter. First, Aman can reply, then you can. Why should the government at all, by way of this law or otherwise, be governing marriages? Why should the sanctity of a marriage be the government's concern? It's not. Is it not a matter of privacy? And I'll also quote to you, sir, specifically in light of the Supreme Court judgment on privacy last year, where it had said the right to privacy is a fundamental right. Is an extramarital affair, therefore, not a private matter? First, Aman, then Sujay.
No, Arthur, first of all, as far as the legality of section 497 and its constitutional validity is concerned, it has been examined not once, twice, but thrice by the Supreme Court, by the apex court, and it has withstood the test of time and judicial scrutiny. However, as I was mentioning to you, law also has to evolve with times, and there are certain anomalies which are there. Perhaps in my personal opinion also, it has to become gender neutral at some point in time, and the government is already considering these issues. Therefore, one of the points in the affidavit which you just read out and correctly read out, Athar, was that the government is only against entirely striking down or decriminalizing the offence of adultery, because this will lead to a diminishing and losing of credibility of institution of marriage, and that is what our assessment and opinion is. But the government's duty and one of the law's objective is to encourage.
Also,
I think Karuna wants to come in here, then I'll go to Sujay. Very quickly, Karuna, an intervention, then we go to Sujay and Deepika again. Because adultery, as we know, Karuna, is a basis for divorce as ruled in previous judgments. We all know that. That's a civil matter. Why should it be regarded as a criminal matter when this is purely in the civil domain?
I think that's a very important point, and also the point was made that there is something about the sanctity of marriage. Now, let me ask a question to the speaker. Is the sanctity, and much more importantly to the government, because I think the government needs to start abiding by the constitution as it currently exists. Essentially, the jurisprudence that has emerged is that the bright line of consent, as I said before, should be the guiding spirit behind every single law, and not some kind of misplaced morality. When a man cheats on his wife with a sex worker or with a widow or with a single woman, that no criminal law is violated? Is it that I mean, that is true, right? At the moment, there's no criminal law violated.
You very well
if a
know that in
husband
cases where
cheats with a single woman, right?
Yes.
So only if that other woman is married, does that other woman's married husband have a claim? So therefore, I think the entire, these references to law commission, etc., it's all moonshine. Because this is, the point that I am making was found in the Brijlal case by the Delhi High Court in 2006, that if a man cheats with a widow, sex worker, single woman, then 497 is not breached. So, there are these misconceptions, that the devil really lies.
So is it your submission that it's an inherently unequal law, it's discriminatory, it treats women unequally, it perhaps pushes them to the definition of being property? I think one particular Supreme Court justice also, I think the CJI used the word chattel there. I mean, these are very, very serious words. This is CJI saying this.
Absolutely. The woman is immune from any sort of prosecution in 497 first. So she's not the victim, it's the man who is being prosecuted. I completely agree if it has to be criminalized. I think the people responsible in the marriage are responsible for it, though if there has to be prosecution, there has to be on that. And let me bring a very important point over here, which I think Aruna is completely missing out at. I've seen innumerable cases where if the man cheats on a woman, she files a dowry and domestic violence case on that man, and it is also considered as mental cruelty. So it's not saying if a man cheats on his wife, then there is no recourse available to the wife. I have seen so many cases where in fact if the wife is adulterous and the husband objects to it, forget about filing a 497 on her paramour or something, it is actually he who gets under the law under domestic violence and dowry charges, and it happens so much all the time. So if you're giving a recourse, you got to give the recourse to both husband and wife. As far as
when the government wants to criminalize adultery but doesn't want to criminalize marital rape?
Well, when you said that how can government comes into play when it is about privacy of two people, well, already we have so many laws where the government is already into the marriage, it is defining the terms and the conditions of the marriage, and it's having a say on everything. But of course, from 497 point of view, I don't think it is just about the consent. Like I said in the beginning, we need to finally have an argument whether actually there is any sanctity of marriage or not. If there is, it should be on both husband and wife.
So quickly then, Sujay Kantawala, how is not punishing a married man for having an affair preserving the sanctity of marriage? I don't think I can phrase that any simpler.
It's not punishing the woman as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. How is that preserving the sanctity of marriage in the first place, Sujay Kantawala?
No, the section is very clear. The section is very clear. The section clearly says whoever has sexual intercourse with a person who is and whom he knows or has reason to believe to be the wife of another man without the consent or connivance of that man. So here what the Supreme Court is going to examine, and from the petitioner's standpoint, is that should strike down the whole section. Look what Lord Denning said, that you can iron out the creases. So Supreme Court can give its interpretation, Law Commission can give its suggestions, the petitioners can be heard, the interveners can be heard. Ultimately the Supreme Court has got powers to lay down the law on this. But personally I feel that the section as it stands, it has withstood the test of time. Maybe it can be tweaked a little here and there, subject to the pleasure of Supreme Court and what the government wants to say before the apex court. But I feel that the woman in this country has been subjected to trauma since ancient times, has been at the receiving end, and therefore we should not foist one more section on her.
point that government wants to put across is that we are against striking down of 497 in its entirety and decriminalizing the provision.
Before I end here, Karuna, I just want your last comment on this one particular point. Just very quickly and briefly, if you could, Karuna. All right, Aman. Simply put, tell me if you agree with this statement somewhat, completely, or not at all. While the need to expand the ambit of the law may be up for debate in the Supreme Court, is there no basis to have a law that will criminalize a deliberate attempt to break the sanctity of the matrimonial relationship, given the fact that India is a very traditional country? We like our conservative customs. Would you agree with that premise partly, somewhat, or not at all?
Supreme Court and the constitutional bench of the Supreme Court is going into the matter because it is considering whether the past judgments of its smaller benches were in fact incorrect. And prima facie, well, I don't want to sort of read any thoughts into that constitutional bench, but it's certainly going into that matter in great detail.
Right.
Now, we must realize that the constitutional rights to not be considered property by women, right? The constitutional right to have such anachronistic provisions which have nothing to do with consent. To sort of address a point that somebody else was making about the DV Act, that's a civil legislation.
I think that's a very important point that you've made, really. The right of women not to be treated or considered property.
And needs to be struck down.
Right. Karuna, we'll have to stop there. We're out of time. But thank you for your time, Karuna Nandi, Deepika Bhardwaj, Aman Sinha, as well as Sujay Kantawala. That, of course, was the special edition of Inside. We did inside a studio for a change. We hope you like it. My name is Athar Khan.